Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Shaynan's Shelf. I am Shaynan. So today I kind of wanted to talk about two books that I just finished recently at the very beginning of October. So it's been a few days since I finished them. I've kind of been thinking about them a bit at the time of recording this. And that is Tikanga Māori by Harini Mokomid, or Sir Harini Mokomid, who I read a couple books by before. He's quite old. He's getting up there. I can't remember exactly how old he is, but I'll probably throw it up on the screen. But he's in his like late 90s, I think, at this point. Uh, he's someone I've always for some reason thought about like emailing him just to thank him for the work that he's done. But then I'm like, should I email someone who's that old? I don't know. Maybe that's a weird thought. And then every year I realize, oh, he still hasn't passed away, thankfully. But now he's even older. Part of me is like, maybe I should just email him anyway. I don't know. Maybe this is like a ridiculous conundrum that I feel like and it perhaps shouldn't actually be a problem. The other book I read was Kete Matauranga, which is was a collection. Like each chapter was by a different Maori researcher and scholar, and just kind of talking about how going about it being Maori, especially since they work for these institutions, whether it be the New Zealand government or these universities that are very, very embedded in the Western Pakeha tradition. And part of me wonders if I should. There was a little bit of me, I guess, that I should say, that was wondering if I should even do this video because I'm not Maori and I'm not even a New Zealander, generally speaking, and I've never even lived in New Zealand either, perhaps as an outsider, or I've never even been to New Zealand. Like, I've never even gone to see Hobbiton. Like, what's with this? And so perhaps I don't have. Some people would think that my opinion is not worth hearing just because of that. But either way, I think those people are rude. And I have some thoughts, at least, and I'm going to share them if you're willing to listen to them. Tikanga is pretty much just customs, and the key word for the other one, Matauranga, I believe, is essentially knowledge. And you'll find with indigenous cultures, especially ones that live in settler states, they often become very westernized, but at the same time they don't. I feel like there's always some sort of conflict going on, at least internally, because the way that they view the world is different, especially historically. And what Mead goes over in his book is largely that he kind of goes over in many ways, this is what we did, this is what we think was the practice, the custom, and it's not really done today. Or perhaps it's being done to some degree, but to a lesser extent, not as heavy handed, less ritualized, maybe. Something I definitely understand from reading this is that heavily on the ritual for Maori culture, very thought out. It is kind of contrary. I wouldn't say it's like Maori culture isn't necessarily a collectivist culture. I think it's perhaps a good in between, but it's certainly not the stark individualism that the Western worldview promotes in many ways. You do get collectivist understandings from the Western worldview with things like Marxism and whatnot, but it's not dominant in what we often consider Western cultures. But so while these Maori thinkers are often trained in the Western framework, I don't know how to say it. They kind of recognize that this Western framework is only capable of so much, that we can utilize this Western framework for what it's good at, but we also can utilize our own Maori worldview and understanding and practices and stuff like that. And my thought in many ways, it seemed like they were willing to take the best of both worlds. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. In fact, I would say, why not? I think the Western worldview is heavily flawed in many ways. I wouldn't think we have the atrocities and the crises that we do, at least on such scales, if the Western worldview was healthy. But it's not. And lots of them talked about the difficulty they have implementing such stuff because it's looked down upon by other academics, professionals, and stuff like that. And I know why that is. It's because those people are embedded in the Western worldview, and it can be hard to change your mind. It can be very hard to change people's minds, and that's one problem with the Western worldview is it's hard to change our mind but they're so convinced that our understanding of the world is the only actual understanding of the world. Everything else is nonsense, right? And I think that's actually a very common worldview in the West, and whether people ever articulated that specifically or not, I think is incredibly unhealthy. I never lived in New Zealand, but the culture I've lived in amongst is Ghana. Um, that's very different. The way they see the world is very different. Now, some things are similar. They're very Christian this day and age, generally speaking, heavily religious. And I think there have been periods where, and this is mentioned by others, including Mead, that the brand of Christianity that they were receiving was definitely against, was a big portion that was against them thinking the way they did, their understanding of their own mythos and reality. And they were kind of like, no, you can't have that because it's wrong. And I think that's less the case today. Christianity's not the one causing it, but now it's the universities, institutions, it's the governments, pretty much having the same effect. They're taking away the identity. Not not healthy. I don't think that's healthy at all. But it's weird to think too. I was thinking how I live in a settler state. I don't live in New Zealand, and one thing I admire about these Maori academics and scholars and is their success, even success convincing other people that Maori ways of looking at the world is rather relatively acceptable. Now I know there are some that definitely are still very much against it, and I think a lot of them are still embedded in their Western understanding. But they are very actively trying to prolong the not only the existence of their race, of course, but the understanding of their race. And something in the United States, I feel like that's so ignored. It doesn't help that the indigenous population in the United States is hardly 1% of the population. Most people do not live near. Most people don't know natives. They don't live, and not that all natives live on reservations, but in the United States, but lots of people do not live near reservations, and then lots of people that do don't have very nice things to say. That is partly due to because many of the reservations, the ones one I lived near was very dangerous before, but I've lived near other reservations that weren't guilty of that so much. So it just kind of depends, but that's just like the rest of the United States too. But I am my DNA tests show that I'm 100% European, and I've never even stepped foot in Europe. And it's weird. Part of me was thinking that hopefully this is not too disjointed. I have some Welsh DNA and Norwegian and Danish. I don't have a single person of any of those ethnicities in my family tree. And yet I still feel some sort of draw towards them just because I know they're there somewhere, even if I don't know their names and stuff like that. The draw has been easier to feel towards, well, just America in general. I've had most of my family have been in America for a couple hundred years at this point, usually. Some not quite so long, and some longer than that, but very Americanized. And that's fine, but I have pretty strong ties when you get back far enough to Germany, to England, and to Scotland and Ireland as well. And I'm like, okay, those places are cool. Those are places I want to learn more about. And then it was kind of Wales, Norway, and Denmark kind of take the back seat because I was like, oh, I have them somewhere. I just don't know who they are. And then I realized I wasn't really considering the flip side. What about those that I don't have any DNA from, but I know who they are? They're in my family tree. And there's only really one that I can think. Actually, there's a couple that I'll mention just briefly. The Germanic world, I say Germany, but I have some Austria and Switzerland. Okay. Cover that real quick. But the outlier is I have some indigenous DNA. Well, sorry, I have some indigenous ancestors, or at least one ancestor that I know the name of. And I didn't get any of her DNA. And not DNA is a pretty fickle thing anyway. But I know who she is. I know where she's from. She's from North Carolina. She's part of the Cherokee Nation. She married an Irishman. I don't know who her parents were, but they were most likely Cherokee, and goes on, and there are probably a lot of Cherokee. And part of me has been thinking that I wouldn't identify necessarily as Cherokee, at least not in the sense of census records and trying to get scholarships, because I think that'd be incredibly disrespectful and I'm definitely not a part of the Cherokee culture, but I've always been someone who tries to care about my ancestors and my past, and I've just kind of ignored this part. And I don't know why, but I'm a little ashamed to say that I did. And so I'm going to try to learn more about Cherokee culture, actually. That's something I think I'm going to try to do. I wouldn't not mind reading more Maori stuff in 2025, but I'm going to try to read some Cherokee stuff because I don't think I've read anything ever about Cherokee, the Cherokee people. Again, I guess to kind of circle back, though, most of these Western understandings, they're like, oh well, they don't have the Sorry, most of these indigenous peoples, like, they get bashed on by the Western man because, like, well, they're savages or they don't think like us, and it's like, well, why do we need? And it's like true that in the sense that they don't think like us, but what I don't see what's wrong with that. Not everybody needs to think like me. Not everybody needs to have such a heavily scientific, empirical data understanding of the world. I think it's led to many bad things, it could be argued at least. And not the least, uh, the colonial situations that we've put indigenous groups in that have been very atrocious in many cases. But lots of these people embedded in the Western mindset, they try to discredit the other worldview or mock it, even maybe think it's cute. I don't think that I don't think that's and maybe in the sense they think it's cute. They gives it some sort of attention, they acknowledge it, but they don't think it belongs in a properly developed society or whatever, right? And there are a couple things I wanted to mention that I think these seem to be quite important in Tikanga Maori, but also to especially some of these scholars. I would say most of these scholars, if not all of them, pretty much mentioned one of these two things. That was care for the environment. The purely capitalistic view of the environment being something to extort, to extract things from, and to take advantage of as much as possible, I think is very unhealthy. And I think it's proper to view ourselves as stewards of the environment, of nature, and to not destroy it just for capital gain. That seems very, very disgusting, to be honest. But the Maori, and I would say my understanding, and this of course is pretty blanketing, but lots of indigenous groups care much more about the environment. It almost seems like, in many ways, the Enlightenment European is kind of the outlier here, where they're like, we're willing to destroy the world for money. And I think that's absolutely insane. But care for the environment. And then the other one would be the importance of whanau. I believe I'm saying that word correctly. Whanau hapu, your extended family and your sub-tribe. And it seemed to be that's what it was more tied to, not necessarily your iwi, your tribe overall. It's essentially your Faka Papa. That is your genealogy is perhaps the best English word to say that one, say for Faka Papa, but it feels like it's more than that, more than the Western understanding of genealogy, that your ancestors are not simply names in a family tree, but they are a part of you. Without them you would not be here, but they are active. They're still active in your life. They ought to be, and you ought to allow them to be. And this is something that I think honestly helped me I guess you could say, fall in love or be very interested in Maori culture, is because of Faka Papa. I feel often that I am an outlier when it comes to actually caring about my family history. I think often that people that care about their family history in the United States and maybe Western cultures in general are the ones that are old, like they're boomers. Essentially, that's when you can care. Who cares when you're young? It's like, well, uh, my thought was in many ways is, well, I love my parents, I love my grandparents. Be very sad when my grandmother is gone and stuff. I love my great grandparents, the ones I got to meet, and I figured, well, I love my great great grandparents too, even if I didn't know them. And especially thinking about this as a Christian, which I am, you're supposed to love your neighbor. And if you can't love your family, then how are you supposed to love a stranger? And I don't know if I could. And so I try to love my family, even the ones I don't know, even the ones that have wronged me or wronged people that I love and stuff like that. And at least Maori culture, I feel like feels like allows room for that. And the West would rather think I'm ridiculous or whatever. Some people might think I'm ridiculous anyway, just for being a Christian, generally speaking. But even I think a lot of Christians don't even care, in many ways, which I think is very sad. That's something that I think makes me disappointed in the Western worldview, and seeing the inverse be true. Like, definitely they care about each other, they care about fellowship in this life, but fellowship through eternity with their Faka Papa. I think it's beautiful. I think it's absolutely beautiful, and I think it's way healthier than what we have, and in many ways something that I feel like we should adopt this. We need to get back to this, pretty much. If that is what perhaps maybe Europe was better that way, I would say it, definitely better than they are now. In the Western worldview is now. Uh, Let me know. I would actually really like to know if there's something similar to Faka Papa for Cherokee Nation in general, but maybe just any Native American tribe. I'm gonna try to study up on that more. That's the land I live in. But yeah, hopefully that made sense. I don't know how much people care to hear my random thoughts on this stuff, and I kind of got off. I think got like I used it as a starting point, but I think I went off on my own thoughts, which hopefully was okay. But I did really enjoy uh, these two books. Highly recommended. Cannot recommend it enough. Some of them are critical of the Western mindset, and try not. I think it's good as someone who is been embedded in that Western tradition his whole life to read it and try not to take it personally. you know, very lovely. So I'll see you guys next time. Please feel free to like and subscribe. I think I need to get better at saying like and subscribe earlier in the video because lots of people don't stick to the end anyway. But if you stuck to the end, I guess let me know. And have a good one, please. And I will see you guys next time. Thanks.